Hello guys, how are you? I hope that you are doing good. And this is Adam, and today we are taking a look at M5 Max versus M5 Pro versus M5. And as you can see, here are the chips in front of us. So let's start first by addressing which chip goes to which device. In this case, the Apple M5 chip goes to the MacBook Air and to the base MacBook Pro. The Apple M5 Pro chip has two variants. Both of these comes with the MacBook Pro, whether that's the 14-inch or the 16-inch. Then the Apple M5 Max chip goes into the Pro only, and it's through the Pro 14-inch and then the 16-inch as well. Now let's talk about the specs and all these fun stuff. While we are doing that, we will address which is for which in terms of what type of a 3D artist you are and which one is better and which one is worse and what do I recommend. Starting with the M5, the M5 is the newest generation Apple chip that we have currently, and the base model of it comes with 10 core CPU and then 10 core GPU. In terms of the memory bandwidth, it has a memory bandwidth of 153, and it can go all the way up to 32 gigabyte of unified memory, or RAM in this case. Now, unified memory, if you do not know, basically it means shared memory, meaning the RAM will act for your graphic card and also it will act for your normal RAM tasks as well. And here you might ask, well, what does the RAM do and what does the graphic memory do? The graphic memory is when you are using an intensive software such as a Blender or Unreal Engine or Cinema 4D or Eclipse Studio Paint or Photoshop or After Effects, that runs on the graphical memory. And then in terms of the RAM is basically, think of it as a sheet of paper and then how many things you can put on that sheet of paper. So it's like a page, and basically the way you go about RAM, how many programs you can open all at once, including your browser, your Safari or Chrome tabs, your After Effects maybe with Adobe Premiere, and then Photoshop or Final Cut Pro or whatever that might be. How many of these can you open? Now you might say, well, I do 2D art, that doesn't concern me. Well, actually it concerns you, because if you are doing animation, especially in terms of 2D, you need to render them, and then the better your GPU is, your graphic memory is, the faster your render times would be. So that's in a lame terms what a shared memory or a unified memory entails. With that, the M5 is really good for anything that is related to productivity, and it's good for compiling code, photo editing, 4K video editing, and then 3D designing gaming. The only two things that we will be focusing on really is a 3D design and then 2D art as well, and then gaming. In terms of a 3D design, if you are modeling using Blender, Maya, whatever that might be, if your main job is to model, this machine will be great, aka this chip will be great, and any machine that comes into it. So that would be your MacBook Air and then your base MacBook Pro. And when I say the base MacBook Pro, keep in mind that the M5 is not available on the 16-inch MacBook Pro, it's only available on the 14-inch. And I would say that the M5 is excellent for people whom are just modeling and then doing scenes, and they do not rely on rendering a lot in terms of a 3D. And especially if you are using a true renderer, such as Arnold, for example, which is arguably one of the most accurate renders that can reproduce real life renders, that render is gonna take a very long time. And Arnold as an engine is slow in nature, and if you take the M5, it will take quite some time for that to be done. Now if you are doing something stylized, that would be a different case. My ideal configuration for the M5, I would say go with a minimum of 24 gigabytes, and if you can go up to 32 gigabytes, I would say go for it. Now in terms of 2D, the M5 is excellent and you do not have to worry about long render times similar to 3D. When you are working with 2D, it's way less intensive on resources in comparison to 3D. So you can simply open your Eclipse Studio Paint or your Photoshop or even your After Effects if you are trying to do like vector animation after you made maybe your vectors with Adobe Illustrator. Those overall, the M5 will not struggle with. and it's not going to take a very long time. So this chip is a chip that I recommend, and I think if you are a 2D artist, you should not go above M5, because no matter what you are doing with Clip Studio Paint or Photoshop, you will be more than happy with the M5. And my recommendation for people with 2D art is a minimum of 24 gigabytes of RAM. And if you can go up to the 32 gigabytes of RAM, I would recommend that as well. So let's talk about the M5 Pro. The M5 Pro comes with two variants. However, I recommend the base variant in comparison to the higher variant, and I will get into why is that in a second. But first, let's explore how many cores we are getting with the M5 Pro. 15 cores for the CPU. And then we are getting 16 cores for the GPU. Now, if you upgrade that, you will get 18 core CPU, so 2 or 3 extra cores. And then with the 20 core GPU, you will get an extra 4 cores for your GPU. Now, you might say, well, this is obviously better. Why you just said a second ago that I shouldn't go to that and stay with the base? My reason for that is because of the bandwidth, as you can see right here. Whether you are taking the base or whether you are going up, the bandwidth is actually the same. That is not the case when we will talk about the M5 Max in a second. However, in a general sense, 307 and 307 is your memory bandwidth, whether you go with the base or the more premium version. Now, if the more premium version comes with your RAM automatically, go for it, but do not go out of your way to get it. And in terms of what the M5 Pro is good for, it's good for people who are doing music production or anything that is AI related. However, these are things we do not care about. What we care about is a 3D design and then 2D art and animation. And you remember the conversation that we just had about animation and how the M5 will take a long time for it to render? With the M5, that would be changing, where your animation render times are actually going to be cut. And since you have a memory bandwidth that is doubled in comparison to the M5, because with the M5 you have 153 gigabytes of memory bandwidth, and here you have 307 gigabytes of memory bandwidth. So since you have all of that memory bandwidth, which means there is more to work with, hence render times, they would be much better. So for that, you can actually expect better render times. So you can do your animation, whether that's with Blender, Maya, Cinema 4D, or whatever that might be. And that actually did rhyme for whatever reason, but oh well. In terms of 2D art, this is an overkill. I would honestly say go back to the M5 and stick with the M5. M5 Pro versus the M5, if I had to pick one and pick a winner, I would definitely pick the M5 because it's more cost effective and the performance is not very far away from the M5 Pro. And especially since what I am recommending is that you would stick with the base configuration of the M5 Pro chip. And even though we will have double the bandwidth, I would still rather wait for the render to be done and save some money rather than actually going for the M5. I feel like the M5 is in a very weird place, because if the bandwidth for the M5 when you go to the upper variant of the chip would give you more bandwidth, that would be great, but since the bandwidth is the same, I cannot recommend it. However, in a general sense, my recommendation for the M5, if you want to go with that, get the 48 gigabyte of memory, which give you 1 terabyte of storage as well, and then you will be good to go, and you can take it either in 14-inch or 16-inch. In terms of the size, I do not have any preference. It's more about what do you want. And speaking about the differences, now we're gonna talk about the big boy, and in this case, we're talking about the M5 Max. Now, the M5 Max is a little bit different. First of all, it's the most powerful chip that Apple offers in the meantime, at least in terms of the laptops. Also, with it, you can go all the way up to 128 gigabyte of shared memory or RAM. And this is the only case where I would say get the upper variant of the chip. And I will get to why. So with the base chip, you get 18 core CPU and then 32 core GPU. With the higher variant, still get 18 core CPU, so it's the same. However, your GPU will jump to 40 cores, so that's an extra 8 cores, which is decent. But honestly, my recommendation for the higher variant is not the 40 core GPU, because you are getting an extra 8 cores. That's because of the bandwidth, because here our bandwidth is 460 gigabytes, yet our memory bandwidth for the higher variant is 614. So you are getting 200 plus gigabytes as a memory bandwidth, and that is really helpful in terms of rendering and graphical tasks of that nature. Now, what is the M5 Max is good for? It's good for model training in terms of AI, which we do not care about. However, as you can see here, it says it's good for a 3D animation, and it explicitly says a 3D animation. And the reason for that, because with the higher memory bandwidth that you have, your render times are going to be so good with this that we are talking about something close to a graphical desktop GPU variant. What is my recommended configuration for the M5 Max? My recommended configuration for the M5 Max is to get the 64GB of RAM, and that will give you 2TB of storage. In terms of 14 versus 16, as I said, it's a matter of a preference. Do you want something that is smaller a little bit and a little bit lighter, or do you want something that is big in size in terms of the monitor and a little bit heavier? In terms of the performance, do not worry about that. It does not make a difference. It's a matter of, oh, do I want a smaller laptop or do I want a bigger laptop? Of whom I would recommend the M5 Max for? I would recommend it for people whom are making animations and they are making movies. So let's say you follow a lot of these artists that make animations with a Blender, and then they publish them on YouTube, and they are simply fan art of anime or Genshin Impact or whatever that might be. To the artists, you really do not need the M5 Max. As I said, the M5 is excellent. However, if you have the money for it, go ahead. However, you will be seeing a lot of diminishing returns where it's not gonna make your life that much better, because how much you are spending with how much you are getting in terms of the performance is not adding up. Like, it's getting to a point where it's being plateaued. The M5 versus the M5 Pro, the M5 is definitely the winner. There is no comparison between that. However, for the M5 Max versus the M5, even though the M5 Max is really good, I would still pick the M5 as my favorite among them all. And the reason for that, because the M5 give you the best performance for the most cost-effective chip ever. The M5 Pro leave less to be desired because of the memory bandwidth. The M5 gets it just right.
Don't care. Late night glow, yeah, the city lit. Fresh style.